Renu Narayan, thank you so much for joining us at the Storytelling Buy-in for Adult session on Monday, August 1st, 2022. Please, I think you're in Chennai like me, but please tell us about your work and fully introduce yourself and please tell us a story.
Thank you so much, Eric. I hope I'm clear and I'm visible. Okay, thank you so much for giving all of us this opportunity every time. And a very good evening to all of you. I don't know, some of you might be, probably Beverly has morning happening there, but I'm so happy to welcome you all to my story. And this evening, I'm sharing a story that I've written myself. I'd originally called it the House on the Hill, but now I have decided to rename it Rose Cottage. I'm a storyteller. I'm based in Chennai. I do storytelling sessions for children as well as for adults. And I also host a festival every alternate month called Katha Potpourri. But over the last 3 events, I find the registrations are dropping. So I'm seriously considering of not continuing it, though many people have told me, please don't give it up. So let's see what happens. So this is the story. It was about 4 p.m. in the evening. The old bus had left the plains far behind, and now it was wheezing and coughing its way, slowly climbing up the steep mountainside. With a constant crashing of gears and the sharp sound of a horn, it took each hairpin bend one by one. And as it continued to climb up and up and up, the temperature dropped and it started to get very cold. There were only a handful of passengers in the bus, and they huddled in their seats, most of them asleep. The bus continued to climb up and up and up. And with a final crashing of gears and with a loud blare of the horn, it completed the last hairpin bend. And there lay the road straight ahead. Soon a bus stop came into view. And the bus, the final clashing of gears, shuddered to a halt. Krishna, who had fallen asleep with his head forward, woke up with a jerk. He looked out. It had already started to get dark. He realized it was his bus stop. Hugging himself with the cold, he quickly picked up his backpack, put it on, and got off the bus. He stood there for a minute and watched as the bus continued on its way. With a final honk, the bus turned around a bend and disappeared from view. Now he was all alone, not a person in sight. The woman at the employment agency had told him to look out for a boat. And he looked around, and there it was, a tiny black boat. On it was written in white, Rose Cottage, with an arrow pointing towards a narrow path that had been roughly cut out through the tea plantation. It seemed to be snaking its way up. Krishna hugged himself closer and started walking at a brisk pace. But it was much steeper than he had expected. Oh, God, am I ever going to find this forsaken place? He thought as he continued to walk, cursing under his breath, wondering whether he was lost. But he remembered that woman saying that the path led only to the house. And finally, when he turned around a bend, there it was, 2 gates standing wide open. And up ahead, he could see a bright light shining and winking as though beckoning him inside. The walk had warmed him up, but now suddenly a cool breeze started to blow, and shivering once again, teeth chattering, he stamped his feet and started walking towards the light. When he came closer, he realized it wasn't a cottage. It was a large colonial bungalow with a sloped tiled roof, huge French windows, flanking a stout wooden door. He pushed the bell. He could hear it jangling somewhere deep inside. Rubbing his palms and impatient to get inside, he waited. He could hear footsteps shuffling towards the front door. Ah! The door swung open. Silhouetted against the light that came out of the hallway stood an old woman leaning on a stick. Yes, she said. Miss Rao, I have come from the employment agency. You're expecting an assistant? Ah, yes, the assistant. Of course, come in and shut the door behind you. It's cold. So Krishna hurried because she had already started to walk away. He shut the door and followed in her wake. Dimly, he could see that there were doors on either side, but she walked further down and turned into a door to the right. He followed her, and what a sharp contrast. The room was warm and welcoming. There was a bright fire burning in the fireplace. The room was comfortably furnished with sofas, upholstered in soft faded cotton. The old woman placed her cane on one of the chairs and lowered herself slowly into the chair. She gestured to the other chair opposite and said, "Please sit." And so Krishna sat down, the warmth of the fire embracing him. He felt better after that long walk. But he felt uncomfortable. She was staring at him. And he felt like her eyes were piercing right into his very soul. You seem very young to me. I was expecting someone older. How old are you? And what's your name? She asked. I'm Krishna and I'm 30, he said. 30? Why would a young man like you want to maroon yourself up in the hills with an old woman like me? It's going to be a lonely life. I hope you understand that. Why are you here? Are you running away from some unfortunate incident? Tell me, young man. Well, to be completely honest, I am running away from a horrible condition. I'm an alcoholic, but I haven't had a drop to drink for the last 2 months. Not because I want to give it up, but because I have run out of money. And please don't think that I come from an unhappy background. My parents are wonderful people. They had me when they were quite old. They gave me all the love, all the material comforts that any child would need. I was brilliant at my studies. I did extremely well and got a job as soon as I graduated. The money, the success went to my head. I started to party and I became a slave to alcohol. Lost job after job, lost my friends. And finally, 2 months ago, I lost my last job. I was managing my life somehow. But yesterday was the last straw when my landlord threw me out. I had no place to go. I could go back to my parents, but not like this. I had 2 options: kill myself or take to a life of crime. And neither was appealing. I wanted to redeem myself desperately, but I didn't know how. And that's when the call from the employment agency came, and I grabbed at the offer. And that's why I'm here. All my worldly possessions are in this backpack. Oh, Krishna, I'm so sorry. You're tired. You must be hungry. And I didn't offer you any refreshments. Just wait a minute. And she pushed the bell next to her. A few seconds later, there was a knock and an elderly man entered the room. Yes, Indu? He asked. Murthy, this young man here, Krishna, has come here to be my assistant. Do you think you could perhaps make some coffee and some snacks for him? Of course, Indu. Hello, Krishna. I'll be right back. And he went away. There was silence in the room. The old woman was gazing into the fire, and Krishna felt himself start to relax. The old man was soon back. On a tray was a cup of steaming, fragrant coffee and some snacks. I'll have just the coffee, please, said Krishna. He picked up the cup. The brew smelled delicious, and he started to sip it. He could feel the warmth of that liquid passing down his throat and warming up his stomach. And as he finished the last drop, he kept it down. Indu, who had been silent all this while, looked at him and said, Krishna, I'm not going to judge you about your life. I listened to your story. Now you listen to mine. I have been living in this house for many years, and I'm not really looking for an assistant, if I must be honest with you. I'm looking more for a caretaker, someone who can take over from Murthy. You see how old he is? He joined me, my father, as an assistant. And when my father passed away, he refused to leave me here alone. He said I wouldn't be able to manage. I'm 90, you see, and he's only a few years younger. He needs to be with his family in the village, but he refuses to leave me. I knew I had to find someone if that man had to go back. And that's when I told the employment agency. You see, if you really look at it, I'm more of a desperate situation than you are. And one more thing I must tell you. Sometimes I wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, really in need of a hot cup of coffee. And that will be your job too. You'll have to wake up, there's a bell in the room, and bring me that coffee. If you're okay with this, then you're welcome to stay. And she smiled. And Krishna looked at her. The smile transformed her. She looked very young and vulnerable. He felt something in his heart. And he said, yes, I'll stay. And that was that. He was shown to his room. It was small and cold, but he was tired. Pulled off the bedclothes, got right in, covered himself, and fell asleep. Sometime later, he heard a bell, but he was too comfortable to move. He simply pulled the bedclothes over himself and went back to sleep. The next morning, he woke up, got out of bed, and walked in search of the kitchen. The rich aroma of coffee drew him in. The room was brightly lit. So many windows, the sunlight was streaming in. The door to the garden was wide open. And someone came in bringing more sunshine and warmth into the room. It was a middle-aged woman, plump and with a wide smile on her face. You must be Krishna, she said. I am Vanaja, Murthy's daughter. I come here every day to cook breakfast and lunch. Indu Akka told me about you. I'm so happy that I have another person to cook for. What would you like to have? Coffee? Idlis? Dosa? Sambar? Everything freshly made. Just the coffee, please, said Krishna. Just coffee? No wonder you're so skinny. You need to put on some weight, young man. I tell you, if you refuse to eat my food, you'll miss something. I am an excellent cook. Ask anyone in the village. Just the coffee, please, said Krishna once again. Fine. She gave him a hot cup of fragrant coffee, and he started sipping at it. Krishna, everything that you need, you will find in this kitchen. Everything is labeled because once I go home, the kitchen is all yours. You might need coffee, Indu may need coffee, so I leave it to you. That's fine, said Krishna. And he walked out. He went back to the sitting room. And sure enough, Indu was sitting there. She looked up when he came in. Did you have a good night's rest, Krishna? She asked. Yes, Indu, I did, thank you. You had something to eat and drink? Just a cup of coffee. I see. And did you hear the bell last night? Yes, I did, Indu, but I was very tired, so I just went back to sleep. Krishna, I did tell you that it's part of your job. It was poor Murthy who brought me the coffee last night. Well, if you're not going to do that, then I'm afraid you'll have to leave. Because if Murthy is going to continue staying here, then I don't need you. You decide. Her voice was stern, but there was a plea in her eyes. Krishna felt ashamed and he said, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. And from that night on, Krishna woke up every time the bell rang. He hated it. He hated her. He hated his situation. Sometimes he just wanted to throttle her, but she would ask just for half a cup of coffee. And when he went back to bed, the bed was so cold. It took him so long to go back to sleep. But as the nights went on, sometimes she asked him to read a book, which he enjoyed reading along with her. Sometimes they shared anecdotes from their lives. So she had such a beautiful, witty way of talking that sometimes he would find himself throwing his head back in laughter. And slowly, they became closer and closer, and a strong bond developed between them. In the mornings, in the daytime, he didn't have much work to do. A little bit of typing here and there. Some odd jobs to be done around the house. Sometimes he would help her out into the garden to sit there for a while when it was sunny and bright. But one evening she said to him, Krishna, do you know that this hill is private? You must go for a walk. You get some splendid views around here, you know. Go and explore. Indu, I'm not the kind who likes to walk. But you must, Krishna. It's an order. It's part of your duty. I insist. Now he resented that, but he did go for a walk. He didn't go for a very long walk the first time. The second and third day, maybe a little longer. But every evening the walking got to him. And soon he was walking further and further and further away. And one evening he found himself right on top of the hill. And just like she said, the views were magnificent. The gigantic mountains, the deep valleys below, the beautiful trees with the colorful flowers, the birds, the exotic butterflies that he happened to see. Sometimes he would lie down on the grass and wait till it grew dark, and he would watch the stars shining up in the sky. And he stopped feeling so cold. And one morning, when he looked at himself in the mirror, he couldn't recognize himself. The walking had increased his appetite, and Manaja had noticed she had been plying him with more and more food, and now his cheeks had filled out. His hair, his body, everything shone with the vibrant vitality of life. And he felt a deep sense of gratitude. One evening, when he was about to set out for his walk, he normally knocked on the door, said bye to her before he left. But that evening when he knocked and opened it just to say bye, she called him in. Krishna, come in, come in. So he went in feeling a little surprised. He went and sat down next to her. And she looked at him and she said, Krishna, are you happy here? Of course, Indu. What makes you say that? I love everything. I love the house. I love you. I love the food. I love the mountains. I'm so happy to hear that, Krishna. You know, have you noticed that these nights I hardly ever ring the bell? I've been sleeping right through, Krishna, and that's thanks to you. So thank you. No, Indu, thank you. My life has changed after I came here. No, Krishna, I'm really grateful you came here. I had no idea why God was keeping me alive. I didn't want to live anymore. My life has not been easy, as you know from all the stories I've been sharing. But now I know. Carry on, Krishna. Have a good walk. And so Krishna left. And he walked and he walked. And he walked for a long, long time thinking about all the conversations they had, the sharings they'd done. And he spent such a long time outside. It was past midnight by the time he got back. And he was surprised to see that the light was still on in the sitting room. Normally, she went off to bed by 10, and she always took care to switch off the lights other than leaving one light on for him. So he knocked and opened the door. She had fallen asleep. Her head had fallen forward. He wondered whether he should disturb her and take her back to bed or just leave her there. He went closer to put a cover on her. Then he felt a strange sense of fear. He took her hand and felt her pulse, and there was none. He placed his cheek on her hand. And with deep, harsh sobs, he started to cry. And he cried and he cried like he had never cried before. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Beautifully told. So that is a story you created, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little about the creative process? Was it inspired by a personal experience in any way? Was it inspired by wanting to communicate an idea in any way? Where did the story come from?
I really have no explanation for these things, Eric. I don't know something. Actually, the whole story about the house and everything is based on my own experience in Kunur when I lived there. We lived in a beautiful colonial house. That house came into my head when I started telling the story. But otherwise, there's really no. It's just that I want to write a story, and I just started off. And sometimes this story just takes over. And maybe I was looking for something where a young person and an old person can help each other. So here I wanted to show that this man is desperate for help because he's an alcoholic, and here she's desperate for help because she's old and she doesn't have anybody to take care of her. I wanted to give in a lot of details, but I thought, no, I think this just the basic story is more than enough, because I just wanted to show that she's alone and he's alone, and he's in a situation where he cannot help himself. She's in a situation where she needs help, and how destiny brings them together. And actually, both of them get helped in the end.
They help each other.
Yeah, they help each other.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Anybody, any thoughts? So have you written it down, Renu? Is it also
Yes.
a written story?
Yes, I have.
But you told it in a very spontaneous manner.
Yes, I always do that.
Yeah, you were not reading it right from the page, right?
No. Actually, the last time I told the story also, the story is a little different. But I try to keep the essential parts there so that I don't miss out on those. Because the fact that he doesn't have any belongings, the fact that he's destitute basically, and she's giving him shelter in return for whatever he's doing for her. And also the conversations, more or less, I wanted to get that in place, but it has shifted, it has changed. Sometimes I feel it's more powerful and sometimes it's less. Today, maybe I have not been in a very good frame of mind for the last 1 month. So maybe the story did not come out as powerfully as it did when I shared it a couple of months ago. But on the whole, I just wanted to portray this this very fact that youngsters and older people generally these days, they don't have time. The youngsters don't have time for the older people. I feel the ones who are 30 plus, and they consider that older people, they don't really want to sit down and have conversations. And I feel it's very important because there's so much we can learn from older people, so much of wisdom that we can gain. I myself am guilty of that. I never had time really to sit with my mother and father and talk to them. So I feel that Beverly's story really made me feel a little bit envious that she has such a beautiful relationship with both her parents. I didn't have such a wonderful one with mine. So I feel that I wanted to show this kind of a relationship where they really don't know each other at all and yet end up caring deeply for each other.
Great.
So,
Go ahead, Veena.
so what does your writing process involve? Do you do a board, or, I
No.
mean, if you're gifted, you just write and you go with the flow, right?
Yeah.
But if you are teaching, or if you are, I mean, as a story writer, you can see that you've already got those ideas. But for a lay person, suppose if he or she has to write, so how does the writing process
See,
flow?
for me, I normally start off with what message do I want to give? What is that is deeply resonating inside that I want to share with the outside world, and how do I build around that? So most of my stories I create starting out with a message, either it's about the environment or about animals. So generally I start out with what do I want to convey through my story, and then slowly I develop the characters around it. This story actually, I have been writing for a writing platform, and they had given a prompt, but my story went totally out of that prompt. It didn't suit the prompt at all. So I thought, okay, let me just develop it and share it as a story by itself. So I just created this story, which was not at all in tune with what they wanted, and I didn't submit it either. I just thought, let me use it instead for myself, and that is how the story grew. And every time I share it, it shifts a little bit because maybe my perspective shifts. And when I try to tell people how to write stories, I always tell them start off with something that really matters to you a lot. What is your core value? What is it that makes you who you are and that you'll never give up? Start off with that, and then the story sort of flows around it. And then the characters and everything, they sort of take over. I feel they sort of take over. I start off writing. I think it's very important to start the writing process. Maybe you may not like the first few, but later on, you might start, becoming better and better at it. Sometimes I feel, I'm not good enough, especially when other people give prompts. I find it very difficult to write. But when I start writing, then somehow the story starts to take shape.
Flows.
Yeah. So I feel it's very important for all of us are capable of writing. All of us have ideas, except that we don't believe in ourselves. In fact, now of late, I have stopped believing in myself, so I'm not able to write. So I feel that comes a stage when you need to take a break, and you need to give yourself some rest and not put so much pressure on yourself. And I have the tendency of doing that. I'm very strict and harsh and critical of myself. So I think that is where we need to relax a bit and say, okay, let the story come. If it's not so good, we can always work on it. I'm really not an expert, Reena, but because you asked me, I'm telling you.
No, it's interesting. Like, I mean, if a person has to paint, it's more intrinsic. He just puts
Yeah,
the colors and he has something in his head
vision.
and he starts off, but he knows sort of where he's going.
Yeah,
But for a layman who doesn't know how to paint, and that can happen for, I guess, for any
anything.
art,
Yeah, very
So
true.
even for writing, it's an art. Sometimes they say that you should just keep writing, just anything, for a few days, just keep writing on any topic. And that's when the flow of thoughts begin to sort of uh, come out. And
Well,
then from
you discover what's on your mind.
Yeah. I think mostly it's a reflection of how, like I said, no, it's a reflection of our core values, it's a reflection of who we deeply are. I think most stories, like Eric and everybody knows here, that all stories have been written with the psyche in mind. I think whoever's written that story is coming from a deep space of resonance. And I think today, when I look at stories, like I see them only in metaphors, like Sureka also mentioned. And when she shared the story, I was trying to look for the metaphor, and I realized that, yeah, Sometimes we throw away something which is very precious to us. We don't look at the value, and then we want it back, and maybe we never get it back. Or maybe there is a chance if we keep trying, we may get it back. We run after things which appear to be very beautiful, more beautiful than what we have, but may not necessarily be so. So I was trying to find that connection, and finally I got it because I was looking at it from my own perspective. How does it resonate with me? So till I found that resonance, I couldn't really take in that story. I mean, I'm trying to look for a deeper meaning behind stories now, especially after I attended a workshop with Eric and Magdalene. I'm looking for more and more resonance from stories, and I'm looking at them more as a real projective device of our own lives. You know, like how we discussed it during the workshop, that we are constantly projecting ourselves into the story as the protagonist, or maybe as the antagonist, or maybe as one of the elements in the story. So when I see elements like light, or I see elements like darkness, it's the light and the darkness within us. Sometimes we are in the darkness, sometimes there is light suddenly that bursts out. So started looking at stories like that, and I find that every fairy tale was written beautifully with a very good message in it. So nowadays it doesn't bother me that the princess is beautiful and the prince and the princess fall in love and they get married. I think essentially it means that you meet your real self and then you are happy, because happiness lies within. So that is how I view stories nowadays. Earlier, I used to be very critical. How can it be always beautiful, beautiful? Why can't ordinary people also fall in love? But I think it just means that the soul is beautiful, you know, that we are all beautiful from inside. And when we actually meet the real self, that is where true happiness. That's when it says, and lived happily ever after. Because we need to learn how to live with ourselves, right? I think that's my understanding.
You might also try some creativity exercises, which are designed to just to open the window, open the door to your unconscious, and let images and characters and situations come up from your unconscious. I'll send you notes about a couple of these
Okay.
activities. It's a different approach from starting with an idea, because when you're working with the unconscious, you don't know what's going to come up. Your conscious mind is not in control.
Yeah.
Gustavo.
For me, thank you very much, Renu, for your thoughts. For me, it's like creating is one thing that has helped me a lot is translating, because most of the stories I like reach are in English, so I have to translating in Spanish and go back and forth. And another thing that has helped me, I have been working with a local theater group on performing, and we have done a play. It's not a play. It's really like a musical. It's about how objects can act. It's objects that the object that work. So we have worked that, and that helps me a lot. And now I am working with this same teacher in Casa del Leitador of something called my duelo. How you say duelo in English? My we say duelo. When somebody dies, and you think about the people who die, and you reflect. What's that called in English? When somebody very near you die, and you make a process of. Can you say that in English? I don't know. When somebody dies, you just think about the people that are dead, and then you reflect on them. There's ceremonies. And that thing, we have a
Awake. Are you looking for the word wake?
no, yes, sort of awake, but we are having a personal wake performing how to perform a wake on somebody we lost. That's where we're doing that. Awake somebody, maybe your father, maybe your mother, maybe a friend, and we are doing that. In a person, each one of us will do a wake in that sense by performing an act. That's what next week I start with that. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Renu. And thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, Sareka. Thank you, everybody. Shall we, so first let's stop recording.